1945 and Boston's 400th anniversary as a borough. But it was hardly the ideal moment for a celebration. 5 long years of war and still no end to it. The future remained agonizingly uncertain, and the immediate past had left too many unwelcome reminders. Not even the Guildhall, symbolic of so much civic history, had escaped being pressed into war service. As Boston braced itself for yet another year of war, people had other things on their minds besides the long continuity of the town's history. In the face of rationing and shortages, meals still had to be scraped together, clothes mended and somehow made to do for another year. With luck there might be a bargain on one of the market stalls if we can only lay our hands on enough coupons. But some things went on much as they'd always done, and the very familiarity of them provided a reassuring link with earlier times. The regular Wednesday cattle market had followed much the same pattern since the early days of the century, and if you'd asked them, or maybe even if you hadn't, some of the people here could have told you a good deal about Boston's more recent history. They'd certainly have remembered that glittering occasion in June 1904 when the new municipal buildings in West Street were officially opened, to be hailed as a new and modern departure which caught the spirit of the present progressive age. That was a day. Brass bands, bells ringing, the streets decked with bunting, a procession of dignitaries in horse-drawn carriages, and to top it all, an amazing novelty, the proceedings were being cinematographed. What better chance could anyone have to cut a dash in a stunning new outfit? There were 400 special guests, including the Lord Mayor of Sheffield and 5 other mayors. Boston's own mayor, Alderman Joseph Cook, arrives with the town clerk, Mr. Staniland, and in due course opens the gates of the new buildings with a gilt key bearing the borough arms in coloured enamels. Afterwards, according to the papers, the proceedings continued until a late hour. In 1910, the proclamation of King George V provided another spectacular occasion for the motion picture camera. Under the watchful eye of Chief Constable Adcock, leading a detachment of police, the procession makes its way from the stump towards the assembly rooms. From the balcony, the Deputy Mayor, Alderman Tom Kitwood, reads the proclamation, and Boston's youngest Boy Scout does the honours with the flag. The following year, the coronation provided another chance for the people of Boston to see themselves on the screen. The children were on their way to a special tea party in Aldridge Park, now known as Central Park, of course. They're walking down Norman Avenue to the park gates, past the newly reopened Centenary Chapel. In 1928, with flag-waving patriotism still very much in fashion, Boston celebrates Empire Day. As the mile-long procession makes its way through the marketplace, it looks as if every child in the borough has been issued with a flag. They're on their way to Central Park for an afternoon of sports, and some of them can't wait to get there. No better excuse for a carnival than the need to raise funds for the local hospital. That was the General in Southend, of course. The pilgrims still lay far in the future. The marketplace was jammed solid as 8,000 people gathered to witness the coronation of the Carnival Queen. Most of them probably wouldn't see very much, but thanks to the modern miracle of microphonic amplification, they'd certainly be able to hear. Miss Lavinia Morley. Having been duly crowned, the Carnival Queen visited the hospital itself, accompanied by the Mayor, Alderman Fred Peck, who was the first chairman of the Hospital Carnival Committee. Later the same afternoon, there was a procession of children's floats, depicting just about everything in the history textbooks, and a good deal else besides. The floats were designed and built in the various local schools. The sky looked pretty threatening as the procession assembled, but the rain obligingly held off, and everyone made it back to the football ground safe and dry. For the rest of the week, the Carnival Queen was kept busy, opening the Old English Market and encouraging her subjects to raise money by every means they could think of. Carnival week ended with another procession. Once again, the weather was touch and go. Fingers were kept well crossed, but this time, unfortunately, the luck ran out. It must have been a hard job to keep smiling. All the same, Boston's first ever hospital carnival fully achieved its purpose of raising the funds for some much needed building work. 18 months later, in March 1934, Alderman Peck laid the foundation stone of the new nurses' home at South End. The Mayor, Alderman Tooley, congratulated everyone concerned. Alderman Lunn wished the nurses every happiness in their new quarters. The following year, an altogether different type of construction work was changing the landscape to the east of the town. From a substation close to the hospital, a 30,000 volt overhead power line was being built from Boston to Skegness. In those days, there were few mechanical aids. Every hole was dug by hand, and every one of the poles was hauled upright by sheer manpower. They didn't even have a concrete mixer. It was difficult terrain. This little crisis at Skirbeck must have been fairly typical. With the poles in place, the bare copper wires had to be hauled across open countryside and ploughed fields. Then came the job of hoisting the wires aloft and fixing them to the insulators. Protective cradles were built under the power cables where they crossed roads or telephone lines. This one was near Hultoft End. Back in town, life seemed to be following a more familiar pattern. But this was 1935, and the second week in May marked the Silver Jubilee of King George V and Queen Mary. Boston celebrated the event in style. On Monday, May the 6th, the children gathered in Central Park for an all-day programme of sporting events and entertainments. Two bands provided the music. One was the Boston Imperial Brass Band, the other wasn't. Jubilee mugs had been given out the previous week, but on Jubilee Day itself, every child was given a souvenir tin of chocolates and told not to eat them all at once. Some hope. Later in the afternoon, there was a fancy dress contest organised by the various schools. On Thursday night, a torchlight procession was followed by a spectacular firework display on the football ground. In 1937, a visit by Joseph Kennedy, the American ambassador, served to reinforce Boston's special links with the United States. At Fidel House, he opened the American Room and went on to address invited guests in the garden. The later 1930s saw a series of hard winters, and the skating fraternity turned them to good advantage. The favourite spot for Bostonians was up near Cowbridge. But before long, people had something more urgent to do with their spare time, and it was no joke. The local defence volunteers, soon rechristened the Home Guard, began with very little in the way of serious firepower. But by 1942, the situation had altered. Regular blacker contests gave units from all over the district a chance to sharpen up their skills. Just as important, though rather less spectacular, were the weekly training sessions. Lieutenant Colonel Giles, commander of the 1st Holland Battalion. A popular event in the summer of 1942 was a Home Guard display in Central Park. And so to 1945, the 400th anniversary of the Borough Charter. Plenty of familiar landmarks, but still no Haven Bridge, of course, and no Relief Road. And what's this? Motoring through Strait Bargate? The Borough Charter's exact anniversary was due on the 14th of May, and it looked like being a pretty quiet affair. But when there were just 6 days to go, by a supremely happy coincidence, the war in Europe finally came to an end. VE Day was proclaimed, and the double celebration provided one of the most memorable weeks in the borough's eventful history. The May Fair, the first since 1939, was specially extended to mark the occasion, and on Sunday, May the 13th, a victory procession made its way through the marketplace to the Stump. Civic oars and halberds were carried by American military police, and the mayor, Alderman Mountain had a special escort of American troops. From earliest times, Boston was a major seaport, so the river has always featured significantly in the life of the town. For some people, it's simply part of the landscape, providing an attractive centrepiece amidst the narrow streets, plus a whiff of mud and seaweed at low tide. For others, in various ways, it's closely connected with their livelihood. Shrimps destined for Van Smirrens. As Admiral of the Wash, Boston's mayor has an official duty to inspect the buoys and beacons, not an especially arduous task on the whole. The 1948 inspection party seemed to have found it a fairly convivial occasion. At Skirbeck, the famous power lines still in position. Some Bostonians have always regarded Down Below as mainly a place for recreation. This boatload of prominent citizens back in 1926 were clearly in holiday mood. But of course there was another side to it. A quarter of a century later, and working methods don't seem to have changed all that much. The upper reaches of the river are better suited to pleasure craft than working boats, but if you were really energetic, you might want to try your luck with an altogether different style of boating activity. And if you did, you could certainly count on a good turnout of spectators. This was 1948. At the time, shortages actually seemed to be getting worse, not better. But on a bright summer's day, you could forget post-war austerity for a while and take the opportunity to show off the latest fashions. Another popular feature in the sporting calendar was the swimming gala, held in the evening at the old open-air pool. Visiting teams from Spalding and Sleaford were generally invited. On the whole, the older generation liked to take its sport more gently. The easing of post-war restrictions and the greater availability of paper meant busy times at Fisher Clarke, the town's leading printer and manufacturing stationer. Nowadays, when printing technology has developed almost beyond recognition, this film, made at the firm's plant in 1948, recalls machines and processes and even office methods that have long since passed into history. But one year in particular marked the real division between post-war austerity and the dawning of a new era. In 1951, Britain finally turned its back on the long years of deprivation and difficulty and launched itself into celebrating the Festival of Britain. Boston's own festival queen, Mary Thomas, was crowned in Central Park by Lady Cunningham and duly presided over a wide range of events. A pageant on the football ground with a cast of 700 recreated some of the most spectacular moments in Boston's history, including the Danish invasions. The children's contribution to the festival was a mass display of dancing and physical activities on the grammar school field. At Boston Airfield, there were grass track races organised by the Motorcycle and Light Car Club. Another day, the recently formed Aero Club hosted a flying display. Some of the stunts looked worthy of 007, or perhaps one should say the Saint. And to round things off, there was a flypast by a Gloucester Meteor, one of these new jet planes, itself a potent symbol of a new age and the changes that lay ahead. For all the history books and festival pageants, Boston life in its earliest days is something we can only imagine. But thanks to the motion picture camera and the foresight of those who took the trouble to record these scenes on film, Boston's more recent history is ours to bring alive again and to share in. Times of tranquility, times of excitement, times of challenge, times of sadness and sombre recollection. And we can be certain, as we travel back in time to join them, that Bostonians in the borough's 400th anniversary year had every reason to feel proud of their heritage and confident of the way ahead.